good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Shroudex. There's a file inside the Foundation's archive that breaks its own rules on purpose. Most SCP documents want you calm, clinical, detached. This one doesn't. This one wants you to feel exactly what it feels like to watch the sky become the enemy. It's numbered SCP-001. And if you know anything about this archive, you know that number means something different than every other file you've heard about on this channel. Because SCP-001 isn't one story, it's a slot. A question the Foundation itself has never been allowed to fully answer, filled instead with dozens of competing, mutually exclusive proposals, each one claiming to be the deepest secret the organization holds. Only one in any single reading can be true. This is one of them. It's called simply When the Day Breaks. By the time we're done today, you'll understand why this specific version of the ending has stayed one of the most talked about pieces of writing this archive has ever produced, and why so many people who've read hundreds of SCP files still say this one is the one that stuck with them the longest. Before we get to the sun, you need to understand why SCP-001 works differently from every other file in the archive, because it's not a minor technicality. It changes how you're supposed to read everything that follows. Every other SCP number is typically claimed once. One author, one canon description, one accepted version of events. SCP-001 doesn't work that way. It's treated by the community that writes it as the most classified item the Foundation possesses, something so significant that the archive refuses to settle on a single answer for what it actually is. Instead, authors submit full proposals, competing visions of what SCP-001 could be, each one a complete, self-contained piece of writing, each one incompatible with almost all of the others. One proposal might claim SCP-001 is a mysterious sealed briefcase that generates the concept of every other SCP simply by being opened. Another might claim it's a gate, or a signal, or an object tied directly to the Foundation's own creation myth. None of them are official in the way a normal SCP file is official. They coexist, unranked, as alternate truths, and readers are left to decide which version, if any, they believe belongs at the top of the entire archive. It's less a filing cabinet and more a shrine with several competing idols in it. The proposal we're covering today is one of the most widely read entries in that entire collection. It was originally written for a contest tied to another major Foundation event, and it takes the 001 slot somewhere almost no other proposal dares to go, not backward into the Foundation's founding, forward into its ending. That distinction matters more than it might sound like it does. Most 001 proposals compete to explain where the Foundation came from, treating the number as an origin point, a founding secret buried at the very start of everything. This one flips that instinct entirely. Instead of asking how the organization began, it asks what happens on the day it finally stops. In a slot already crowded with creation myths, that alone made it stand out the moment it was published. The file is credited to an author writing under the name S.D. Locke, and its title alone tells you most of what you need to brace for. When the Day Breaks. Note that S.D. Locke functions here the way most credited names do throughout this archive, as an author handle rather than a character confirmed to exist inside the fiction itself. The file doesn't ask you to wonder who Locke is. It asks you to focus entirely on what Locke wrote down. Object Class: Apollyon. If you watched our orientation episode on this channel, you already know what that word is doing at the top of this file. Apollyon isn't difficult to contain. Apollyon means the Foundation has already lost. It means whatever this is has either already broken every containment method available, or was never something containment could touch in the first place. This one is the second kind. Because the anomaly at the center of this file isn't a creature. It isn't an object sitting in a vault somewhere. It's the sun. Not a new star, not something that arrived from outside, the sun that has hung over this planet the entire time humanity has existed, doing on some day the Foundation never saw coming, something it was never supposed to be capable of. The file is notably honest about how little the Foundation actually understands about why this happens. There's no origin story attached to the change, no trigger event the researchers managed to trace backward, no warning sign anyone documented before it was already too late to matter. In an archive built almost entirely around the promise that everything eventually gets explained, this file refuses to make that promise even once. According to the file, the change begins the moment visible light from the sun touches a living thing. Not radiation in the way people usually picture it, not heat. The ordinary band of light your eyes process every single day, somewhere in the range of roughly 390 to 700 nanometers, the same light that lets you read this sentence off a screen, becomes the trigger. Any organism exposed to it begins to liquefy, not instantly and not painlessly by every account survivors leave behind, but steadily the body losing its shape the way wax loses its shape near a flame, until what's left isn't a corpse, and isn't quite a living thing either. And here's the detail that turns this from a disaster into a nightmare with a Foundation case number on it. The transformation doesn't erase the mind inside it. Whatever the person or animal was before, some fragment of memory, of behavior, of intention, survives the melting. The file designates these resulting entities SCP-001-A, and they don't simply lie there. They move. They remember faces. In some accounts, they still recognize voices, and they use that recognition, calling out with tones that sound almost like the person they used to be, specifically to draw the people who haven't been exposed yet a little closer to the light. It gets worse before it gets any clearer. The file notes that ordinary night doesn't fully solve the problem, because moonlight, reflected sunlight, carries enough of the same trigger to cause the same transformation, just slower. There is no permanent safe hour. There's only degrees of danger and increasingly narrow places left to hide from all of them. Think about what that detail actually does to a survivor's math. A thick cloud layer buys time, not safety. An overcast sky becomes something people start praying for instead of complaining about. Even a clear night with a full moon, the kind of night that used to just mean good visibility, becomes its own quiet countdown. The file never states an exact survival window for moonlight exposure, and that vagueness is deliberate. Nobody left alive inside the story has had the luxury of running that experiment twice. The file is unusually specific about how fast this went wrong, and specificity, in this archive, is almost always more disturbing than vagueness would have been. Within the first 24 hours of the event beginning, the recorded death toll reaches approximately 6.8 billion people. Not over a war, not over a famine stretched across years. In the time it takes a single day to pass, calculated the ordinary way the sun always used to calculate a day, the overwhelming majority of the human species is gone or transformed. Vegetation, notably, is treated differently in the file. Plant life remains largely unaffected structurally, continuing to photosynthesize under the same light that liquefies animal tissue, which means the world left behind isn't a scorched wasteland. By some accounts, it's almost the opposite: green, sunlit, and completely uninhabitable for anything that used to walk through it. That contrast is the quiet horror sitting underneath the loud one, a world that still looks, from a distance, like it's fine. There's also a detail in the file about certain biological anomalies losing their unusual properties once exposed to the event, as though whatever is powering the change in the sun overrides or erases anomalous traits entirely, rather than simply adding one more anomaly on top of them. It's a small line, easy to skim past, but it reframes the scale of what's happening. This isn't described as one more threat entering the Foundation's world. It reads more like a reset being pushed on every anomaly the Foundation has ever cataloged all at once without asking permission from any of them. Scale it another way. Every mobile task force this channel has ever mentioned, every site director, every Class D batch waiting on its 30-day cycle, every carefully worded amnestic protocol built to manage one town at a time, All of it was designed around the assumption that whatever went wrong would go wrong somewhere, locally, containably. This event breaks that founding assumption in the first 24 hours, which is why so much of the file afterward reads less like containment procedure and more like a hospice note for an organization that built its entire identity around never running out of options. An individual SCP-001A instance is unsettling enough on its own. What makes the scenario genuinely apocalyptic is what happens when more than one of them meet. The file describes these entities as capable of merging on contact, fusing at a molecular level into a single, larger mass that absorbs everything that touches it afterward. There's no stated upper limit to how large one of these combined entities can grow. Small, transformed animals become part of larger transformed neighborhoods. Transformed neighborhoods, over enough exposed time, become something closer to a single continuous organism spreading across whatever ground still receives daylight. It's worth sitting with what that actually implies. This isn't a monster hiding in a facility, waiting for one containment breach to go wrong. This is an entity that grows every single day the sun rises, using the exact same event that used to just mean morning. There's a specific detail in the survivor accounts that captures this better than any summary could. Some instances, according to those records, retain enough of a person's former voice and mannerisms that loved ones nearby genuinely hesitate before running, just long enough for the merge to reach them too. That hesitation isn't framed as a character flaw. It's framed as the exact thing that made these people human in the first place, which is precisely what the anomaly appears built to exploit. And there is, according to the file, no exemption for the already dead. Bodies that die by any means and are later exposed to the light don't simply decompose the normal way. They transform anyway, becoming SCP-001A instances regardless of the cause of death, which means even the Foundation's oldest, most reliable form of finality stops being reliable the moment daylight touches it. That single detail closes off the one strategy survival fiction usually leaves open. In most apocalypse scenarios, the fallback plan is simple. If it comes down to it, at least death ends the threat. This file removes that fallback entirely. There is no clean ending available inside the story, not even a private one, and several of the survivor accounts embedded in the file circle back to that realization more than once, in language far less clinical than anything else on the page. It also changes how the Foundation itself, within the fiction, has to think about its own dead. Standard procedure across almost every other file in this archive treats a body as the end of a problem, something to process, catalog, and close out. This event makes every body a pending liability instead, something that has to be actively kept out of daylight indefinitely, whether it belonged to a researcher, a Class D subject, or an ordinary civilian who never knew any of this existed. Death stops being an administrative endpoint. It becomes one more thing that has to be contained. That mechanism rewrites the physics of grief inside the story, too. In almost every other file this channel has covered, losing someone to an anomaly is treated as a discrete, final event, however horrifying the details around it get. Here, loss doesn't stay final. A body kept safely in shadow can still, weeks or months later, become exposed by nothing more dramatic than a door left open at the wrong hour, which means every act of mourning in this scenario carries a second, quieter fear underneath it. Not just that someone is gone, but that gone might not be permanent, and that whatever comes next might still know your name. Even here, even with civilization measured in casualties per hour, the file keeps its procedural bones. There is still a containment procedures section. It just reads less like a plan for victory and more like a set of last instructions. Since the anomaly itself cannot be contained, the surviving directive shifts entirely toward the people still alive to read it. Personnel are ordered into secure, established shelters and told to maintain contact with one another by whatever communication still functions. 2 locations are named specifically as rally points, Site 5 and Site 19, with survivors encouraged to reach either one by any means still available to them. Anyone who learns the location of the O5 Council, in whatever state the Council still exists, is ordered to relay that information directly to a figure the file simply calls the Administrator, the same shadowy authority our orientation episode touched on, the one some tales suggest stands above even the 13 overseers themselves. Even at the edge of extinction, the chain of command the Foundation built for ordinary Tuesdays is still the chain of command it falls back on. There's something almost tragic in how faithfully that chain of command holds. Whoever wrote these procedures didn't stop believing in structure just because the structure had nothing left to structure. Reporting lines stay open. Designated rally points stay designated. It's bureaucracy continuing to function purely out of habit long after the thing it was built to protect has mostly stopped existing. And that detail says more about how deeply procedural this organization is than almost anything in its ordinary, non-apocalyptic files ever could. Travel instructions follow, and they read like survival advice because that's exactly what they are. Anyone who has to move is ordered to cover their body completely. Multiple layers of protective material preferred over a single barrier that light might still find a way through. Traveling on foot is to be avoided wherever possible, since exposed time is exposed risk. Cities and man-made structures, dense with shadow and shelter, are named as the best available protection, while open ground that used to be forest is flagged as one of the worst places a survivor could end up, offering the illusion of cover with almost none of the actual protection. Air travel, when it's available at all, is listed as the preferred method of movement, putting the smallest possible window of exposure between one shelter and the next. Every other file we've broken down on this channel earns its horror by staying cold. Clinical distance, third person, adjectives kept to a minimum. When the day breaks, throws part of that rulebook out on purpose, and it's worth understanding why that choice works instead of breaking the format. The proposal is written as a hybrid. Sections of ordinary Foundation documentation, the item number, the object class, the containment procedures, sit right beside passages written in second person, placing the reader directly inside a survivor's account of the event as it happens. You aren't told a survivor heard something outside the shelter door. You're told you did. That choice does something most horror writing on this archive doesn't attempt. It collapses the distance between the reader and the casualty count. 6.8 billion is a number too large for almost anyone to feel directly. One second-person paragraph describing your own hands, your own breathing, your own decision about whether to open a door does more emotional work than the number ever could on its own. The file understands that, and it uses the format shift specifically to make sure the statistic doesn't stay abstract for long. That shift is jarring the first time you hit it, and that's the entire intention. The clinical sections tell you what the Foundation knows. The survivor sections make sure you feel what the Foundation at this point can no longer protect you from. By the file's own internal logic, the organization that built an empire out of information control has finally run out of the one thing it always relied on: distance. There's a reason this particular 001 proposal has stayed one of the most discussed entries in the entire archive for years. And it isn't only the body count. Nearly every piece of horror fiction, this channel's own back catalog included, runs on the same unspoken agreement. Darkness is where the danger lives. Light is safety. Visibility, the thing you run toward when something is chasing you. When the day breaks, takes that agreement and simply refuses to honor it. Here, the sun, the single most consistent symbol of safety human storytelling has ever had, becomes the exact thing every survivor has to hide from. Night, historically, the Foundation's most dangerous hour in file after file across this archive, becomes the only window survivors get. Some readers have connected that inversion directly to a line buried in the Foundation's own framing material, in an essay describing the organization's philosophy, where an unnamed author reflects on darkness as protection rather than threat. Whether that connection was the deliberate seed for this proposal or something the community noticed afterward, the thematic thread is hard to miss once you've seen it. This file isn't just an apocalypse, it's an argument dressed as an apocalypse about which direction safety was supposed to come from all along. It also recontextualizes everything this channel has ever told you about why the Foundation keeps its documents so relentlessly cold. Distance, procedure, clinical language, all of it has always been framed as a kind of shield, a way of managing horror without being consumed by it. This proposal is the one moment in the archive where that shield visibly fails. The prose gets warmer exactly when the situation gets worse, and the effect is unlike almost anything else this channel has covered. With a scenario this total, it's worth asking the question this channel's audience always ends up asking anyway. What, if anything, in the Foundation's usual roster makes it through this? The file doesn't spend much time confirming specific survivors, which is itself part of the point. But the broader archive has speculated for years about anomalies built to withstand exactly the kind of punishment this event delivers. An entity known throughout the archive for regenerating from almost total destruction, kept for most of its documented history submerged in corrosive fluid, specifically because nothing else reliably holds it, is one of the names that comes up constantly in that speculation, precisely because submersion could plausibly shield it from direct light long enough to matter. None of that is confirmed inside this file itself. It's the kind of question the proposal leaves open on purpose, the same way it leaves almost everything else open once the sun changes the rules. That's consistent with how the file treats its own ending, too. There's no confirmed survival of the Foundation as an organization anywhere in the document. Sites go quiet. Communication attempts go unanswered. The last confirmed structure standing by the time later tales connected to this proposal pick the story back up is smaller, further scattered, and far less certain of its own future than any Foundation file usually allows itself to sound. None of this is presented with certainty, and that uncertainty is worth repeating clearly for anyone treating this as settled fact. The proposal leaves the fate of specific anomalies and specific personnel unresolved on purpose. Fandom speculation has filled a lot of that space over the years, some of it thoughtful, some of it little more than forum debate, but the base file itself stops well short of confirming most of it. When we say something is speculation in this episode, that's exactly what we mean, no more and no less. What the wider community discussion does get right, consistently, is the underlying logic behind why certain kinds of anomalies would plausibly outlast this event even without the file confirming it directly. Anything already isolated from direct sky exposure by its own containment design, deep underground sites, sealed vaults, entities kept suspended in liquid for unrelated reasons, inherits a kind of accidental protection nobody originally built it for. It's one of the quieter ironies buried in this proposal. Some of the most carefully engineered prisons in the Foundation's entire catalog may end up doubling as the last shelters left standing, purely by coincidence. Remember, this is one proposal out of dozens competing for the same number, and most readers who spend real time in this archive will tell you the same thing. Very few of those other proposals get referenced, expanded, and revisited by other authors nearly as often as this one does. Later tales set inside its aftermath. Fan discussion threads still active years after the file was first published, still arguing over which anomalies would or wouldn't survive a sunlit apocalypse. Entire spin-off pieces exploring specific survivor logs in more depth than the base file ever needed to. For an archive built almost entirely on collaborative, unranked storytelling, that kind of staying power is close to the closest thing this community has to a verdict. It didn't earn that reputation through shock alone. Plenty of 001 proposals reach for scale, for stakes, for the biggest possible ending. This one earned it by using that ending to ask a quieter question underneath all the noise. What does an organization built entirely on secrecy, distance, and control actually do, once the one force keeping the entire species alive turns out to be the one thing it was never equipped to contain? It also helps that the proposal never oversells itself. There's no triumphant twist buried in the final section, no last-minute reversal where the Foundation finds a clever way to fix the sun back to normal. the file ends the way it starts, procedural and unresolved, and that restraint is very likely the real reason it has aged as well as it has. Endings that refuse to comfort the reader tend to get remembered a lot longer than endings that do. There's a broader lesson in that restraint too, one worth carrying into every other file this channel opens after today. The scariest documents in this archive are rarely the ones that show you the most. They're the ones that trust silence, procedure, and a single unresolved detail to do the work that a jump scare never could. When the Day Breaks earns its reputation precisely by refusing every easy way out available to it, and that refusal is a large part of why, out of dozens of competing proposals fighting for the exact same number, this is the one so many readers keep coming back to. So that's SCP-001, S.D. Locke's proposal, When the Day Breaks, not the origin the Foundation was built to guard, an ending it was never built to survive. A sun that stops being safe, a darkness that finally means something other than danger. A chain of command that keeps issuing orders, quietly, professionally, even after there's almost no one left to receive them. Remember, this is only one version of SCP-001. Somewhere in that same slot, other proposals are waiting, describing entirely different answers to the same impossible question, and none of them have to agree with each other to still be true within their own reading. That's the strange privilege this one number gets that no other file in the archive shares. I'm Shroudex, and when the day breaks, in this particular version of events, you don't want to be standing outside to see it. See you in the dark.